So with all of that education that you do, you know, and then obviously showing that you care to really help the athlete or the soldier to really open up to you, how do you approach those techniques, or how do you bring that to the table on a daily basis?
Yeah, so that's funny because I punch in earlier than most people do.
Okay.
So I'm actually, my first session will start at 5.
Okay.
And the reason I did that is because we have a lot of leaders that are very tied up in time. You know, that's, if there's something more we can have, it's probably time. And so when I first got the job, it was, hey, let's start at 6:30. You know, start at 6. First session starts at 6:30, and because everybody trains from 6:30 to 8. That's our standard training block. Okay. And so I said, well, there's a lot of people that need services before that, and they would probably take on those services. So we tried a 5 o'clock session, which would roll me from 5 to 6, and then 6 to 6. You know, 6 to 6:30. I have a little transition period. 6:30 to 8, everybody trains, and then I transition. You know, so what I did was, I said, let's take a look at what fits people's schedules. So again, taking into account, like, how do they work? What's their work schedule like? And I started to notice our executive athletes, primarily our leaders, right? The officers, the senior enlisteds, they liked working a lot earlier because they were able to knock it out and then be done with it. So we started offering a 5 o'clock service. Now you take 5 o'clock, what do they look like coming in at 5 o'clock and starting? You know, it's dark for an hour. Fortunately, we have good relationships with people at facilities, and we have facilities to work in and out of. The military is born and bred and doing stuff really, really early and getting after it. But then you have to think of, okay, you have to address how they're recovering and sleeping, because you can see them come in at 5 o'clock and sometimes they look like a zombie, and sometimes they look really fresh and energized. I think that's when you put your coach's eye on and you take a look at them through a different lens. You say, you know, how you feeling today? I notice you're a little bit more tired, a little more lethargic, and you just have to be blunt with them. You know, I think once you start to throw too many sciencey terms at them, they're like, oh, like they kind of get turned off. So I'll just say, hey, well, you know, you feeling all right today? You look a little bummed out. Look a little tired. They're like, yeah, I just came off of staff duty. So that means they had maybe just pulled a 24, or they're at the end of their 24-hour shift. You know, then you have to make that call. Like, do you push them through that training session, or do you send them away and say, hey, just call it water under a bridge, and it is what it is. You go and sleep, punch out, get some sleep, and then come back later, or I'll see you in a day and a half or a day. And so I think that's where the approach comes in, because once they know that you're empathetic to that, you're not there just to give them their therapy or their training session. You're really looking at them from a different perspective. You know, to put it in simpler terms, I think we're professional stress managers. I say this a lot, right? It's like we have to know when to induce and when to pull back, and then when can we, you know, put a little bit more, and when do we just go through a recovery session and flush the system. So I think that's where it opened my eyes to understand, like, you have to look at training and physical prowess and training and rehabbing people from a little bit of a different perspective, because when they're tired, when they're overstressed, increased pain signals, lack of motivation, you know, and so you don't want to send them on their way knowing that you just basically put a hatchet in them and they're walking out of here like with a limp. So I think that approach is huge. And so offering services at early for people that can make the time, and then going into normal training sessions at 6:30. That's kind of like, sometimes I'll teach big groups. I'll do leadership education. We do a la carte services for units. Let's say, hey, we want to come in and work with gait analysis. And that was big, you know, taking on this job and like, hey, gait analysis is a part of your job. Like, I don't know how much gait analysis you got in school, but when you go through it,
anything.
Like you look at you remember that gait picture, you know what phases you're in, but have you really looked at somebody running? And so I learned real quick on what my resources were on who are the experts in the running industry. You know, you look at the Olympic training centers, who's their coaches. You look at runners of the world. You look at coaches, marathoners, ultra marathoners, which I never thought I'd have to study from, you know, because in the military, they go miles, you know, specifically for ruck-based selection schools, special forces, ranger assessment. So they have to put miles on their feet. So you kind of have to figure out, you know, on the fly and on the job, what works, who to learn from, where do you have to dive into to kind of pick up a little bit more skills. And so the morning is a lot of physical training. I do a rehab at 05. I'll do some more trainings at 9. And the reason why I offered 2 sessions, and one at 5 and one at 9 o'clock, is because some people couldn't make it to a 9 o'clock because their work schedule, everybody's work schedule starts at 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
Right? So they train at 6:30 to 8. They have breakfast and hygiene. They do their thing. They get ready. And then they punch in for first formation at 9.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes you can't miss that first formation because that's your roll call.
Yeah.
Right? But they can make a 05 and still make work call. So what's it to me to sacrifice, getting up early?
Yeah.
When I know that this is a service that's warranted, and then it just brings, I think, a better value added to our clinic to say, hey, there's options for you here rather than just being stuck to, you have to come in at this specific time. Because again, I'm one of one basically running around doing a lot of this extended service. So I try to make myself available. Again, it's hard because I don't want to run myself in the ground. But yeah, from like 5 to 9, it's a lot of physical training. 9 to about 11, typically rehabs. It could be broken up by lower, upper quarter. It could be individualized training. It could be going into meetings and doing injury prevention briefs and injury mitigation briefs. Showing leaders kind of, hey, here's what I'm seeing in trends. So sometimes I'll be that stalker and I'll just watch, units because I can see what their shirt says, so I know where they're from, and I'll just kind of watch. And I think that's huge because observing and being able to talk what's happening on the ground to leaders that may not know, when they're leading 3,000 soldiers, they're not going to know exactly what happens day in, day out. But then that allows us to come in and say, hey, here's a problem, but also here's a solution. Right? Because the worst thing you can do is say, hey, you're doing this wrong, but not provide a solution. They're like, what good is that?
Exactly.
So we draw the lines and connect the dots between, our injury rate's high. Have you seen a spike in certain injuries lately? And there could be a correlation, just anecdotal correlation, that when you're observing, you see certain things happening, and then they pop up on this report, and everyone's like, why are you red? Because everybody else is amber and green, but why are you red? And you can help the leader understand so they don't get sharpshooted in the meeting to say, sir, ma'am, why are you red? Explain this. They already know in advance. So that's another part of what I do, a lot of surveillance. So I can feed information and kind of be a liaison to leaders when it's just an extra set of eyes that maybe they didn't have. They truly appreciate that. They do not like getting sharpshooted in a meeting, getting blindsided as a leader. It's like, that's the most embarrassing thing. But if you can provide that and get their extra set of eyes, that gives them some more leverage to tackle some of the problems that we're trying to get ahead of, So, but yeah, that's, a lot of training in the morning, meetings, educational seminars. I don't like to use the word expert because I'm not necessarily an expert and I don't really like it, but we try to be as provide as much knowledge as we can because again, we're seen as experts in the field, however you want to take that, but we still have a lot to learn. There's a lot to learn. It's changing. It's so dynamic. And so we just try to relay that information and be another asset to them that gives them some more value and make them a little more bulletproof, if you will.
No, that's one thing. I mean, you say so many good gems. Like, everyone needs to just rewind this and listen one more time because there's so many good things in here. But like, I think one of the unique things about the military, right, is that it's very structured. And although it's very structured, I like what you said, like how you kind of looked at what needed to be done and you were flexible within that structure to give more options. And, people might not be in the military per se, but with whatever your goals are, right? Because everyone has jobs. You have to work, right? And there's so many things that you can do to make whatever it is, physical activity or nutrition or getting sleep, you can make it work a lot better with your schedule. It doesn't have to be done one way. And I think that's what we can take a lot from, the military structure and everything, that there are ways to rearrange everything and still have a good balance where it's just not overloaded in one aspect and then you're just driving yourself into the ground. I think that's the one thing that I liked about the structure and how you gave them different options. The other thing too is how you're addressing like everything from, observing what's happening, observing some of the trends and everything. I think that's a tremendous attribute to really help to prevent things before they become a problem. And in the field of athletic training, as both of us know, I mean, it's always easier to prevent things. I mean, even simple things like, hey, someone's going to step on that ball, we better move it. That's way easier than dealing with the sprained ankle after. So it's always looking for the preventative measures that we can instill to the population. And I think for the general, or anyone listening to this, for the general population, that's the thing that we want to kind of nail home, or the take-home message is like, try to have that prophylactic or that preventative mindset instead of relying, like you said, on pills, potions, and all of these other things that, you know, it's kind of masking the issues, taking care of the symptoms, but we're not addressing the underlying cause. So the preventative mindset that you take to the military field, I think that's a huge asset for them, so that, you know, you're saving them a lot of time, stress, frustration, and of course injuries in the meantime.